I was sitting in my husband's backyard, watching the barbecue smoke drift through the summer air, listening to his family's laughter echoing around me. After 3 years of marriage to Marcus, I thought I was finally fitting in. The smell of grilled burgers mixed with the scent of freshly cut grass, and for a moment, everything felt perfect. But sometimes one single sentence can shatter everything you believed about your place in the world. I never expected that Isabella's cruel joke would become the catalyst for the biggest revolution of my life. Before I share this story with you, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit that like button if you have ever felt overlooked or undervalued in someone else's family, and do not forget to subscribe for more stories about finding your true worth. Because what happened next will show you that sometimes disappearing is the most powerful way to prove your value. Trust me, you will want to see how this challenge played out. Living with Marcus felt like walking on eggshells wrapped in silk. My husband of 3 years was a software engineer who earned twice my marketing salary, and his family never let me forget the difference. Marcus came from what you might call upper middle-class comfort. His father, Harold, was a retired bank manager. His mother, Patricia, had been a high school principal, and they lived in a sprawling colonial house with manicured hedges and a 3-car garage. The family dynamic was suffocatingly tight. Every month, without fail, they held their sacred barbecue gatherings where stories were shared, achievements were celebrated, and I was reminded of my outsider status in subtle but unmistakable ways. Harold would man the grill with the precision of a military operation. Patricia would orchestrate the side dishes, like conducting a symphony, and their children would orbit around them like planets around the sun. Isabella, Marcus's older sister, was a successful lawyer at 32 who owned a downtown law firm and drove a Mercedes that cost more than I made in a year. She had this way of speaking that made everything sound like a cross-examination. Every conversation felt like I was being measured against some invisible standard that I could never quite reach. Then there was Daniel, the baby of the family at 26, currently grinding through medical school and living off a combination of student loans and family generosity. I worked at a small marketing firm downtown, the kind of place where everyone wore multiple hats, and the coffee machine was older than some of our interns. My salary was respectable by normal standards, but in Marcus's world, it might as well have been pocket change. I contributed what I could to our shared expenses, but Marcus carried the heavy financial load, and his family made sure I knew it. Patricia had this particular talent for making observations that felt like tiny paper cuts. She would mention how Isabella had made partner at her age, or how Daniel's future as a doctor would provide such stability. When she looked at me, I could see the question in her eyes. What exactly did I bring to the table? I tried everything I could think of to prove my worth. I learned to make Patricia's famous potato salad, memorizing every ingredient and measurement. I brought expensive wine to family gatherings, spending money I barely had to impress people who probably did not even notice the label. The worst part was Marcus's silence during these moments. When his mother would make her pointed comments about career stability, or when Isabella would share her latest legal victory, while pointedly asking about my little marketing projects, Marcus would simply change the subject or find suddenly urgent business on his phone. I told myself he was avoiding conflict, but deep down, I wondered if he agreed with them. Our marriage had been struggling lately, though we both pretended everything was fine. Marcus worked longer hours, spent more time at his family's house, and seemed to have less and less to say to me when we were alone. I kept thinking that if I could just prove myself to his family, maybe I could win back his attention and respect. I was about to learn that some battles are not worth fighting. The week before that fateful barbecue, I threw myself into preparation like I was planning a state dinner. I spent hours perfecting Patricia's potato salad recipe, testing batch after batch, until I achieved the exact balance of mayonnaise and mustard that she preferred. I bought a bottle of wine that cost nearly $200, researching the vineyard and vintage to make sure it would impress Harold's refined palate. Marcus had just received a promotion at work, and I hoped this success would put everyone in a generous mood. Maybe this time would be different. Maybe this time they would see me as more than just the woman who happened to marry into their perfect family. I should have known better. The barbecue started like all the others, with Harold arranging his grilling tools with surgical precision, while Patricia directed the food placement with the efficiency of a military commander. The backyard was immaculate as always, with its perfectly trimmed lawn and carefully arranged patio furniture. Daniel arrived first, looking exhausted from his clinical rotations, but brightening immediately when Patricia fussed over how thin he had gotten. Isabella swept in fashionably late still in her lawyer clothes, regaling everyone with stories about her latest courtroom victory. I set my potato salad on the designated spot and opened the expensive wine, watching Harold's eyebrows raise appreciatively when he read the label. For a brief moment, I felt hopeful. Maybe the money I had spent would translate into the acceptance I craved. But as the afternoon progressed, I found myself sliding back into the familiar role of observer rather than participant. The family conversations flowed around me like water around a rock. They discussed Daniel's upcoming exams with the intensity of a medical conference, analyzing his schedule and offering advice about study strategies. Isabella held court about her recent legal triumph, describing how she had dismantled opposing counsel's arguments with surgical precision. Marcus shared updates about his promotion and the new responsibilities it entailed. When the conversation briefly turned to me, I mentioned a successful campaign I had developed for a local restaurant chain, but the topic shifted quickly to Marcus's work achievements. It was as if my professional life was merely a footnote in the real conversation. Patricia asked when Marcus and I might start thinking about children, but the question came with an undertone of concern about financial stability. Isabella chimed in with observations about the importance of career security before taking on family responsibilities. Marcus nodded along with his family's concerns, and I felt that familiar tightening in my chest. Here I was again being discussed rather than included, evaluated rather than embraced. The wine I had carefully selected sat largely untouched. The potato salad I had perfected was complimented briefly before the conversation moved on to more important matters. As the sun began to set and the second round of drinks appeared, the family's inhibitions started to loosen. Daniel began sharing stories about his medical school classmates, and Isabella started making increasingly pointed observations about life choices and compatibility. Patricia mentioned how wonderful it was that their family had always been so close-knit, so understanding of each other's needs and expectations. I could feel the shift in atmosphere, the way conversations became more pointed, the way glances lingered a little longer. It was like watching storm clouds gather on a previously clear day. I had experienced this before at family gatherings, but tonight felt different, more charged with unspoken tensions. Isabella was on her third glass of wine when she started what would become the conversation that changed everything. She began with seemingly innocent observations about family dynamics, about how some people just naturally fit into established groups, while others struggled to find their place. Her words were carefully chosen, like legal arguments designed to seem reasonable while delivering maximum impact. "You know what I was thinking about today?" Isabella said, her voice taking on that particular tone she used when she was about to make a point that she found particularly clever. "I was wondering about the impact different people have on our family dynamic." She gestured around the table with her wineglass, her lawyer's training evident in how she built her case slowly, methodically. Daniel, already several beers in, laughed and encouraged her to continue. Harold and Patricia exchanged knowing looks, the kind that longtime married couples share when they can anticipate where a conversation is heading. Marcus seemed oblivious to the undercurrents, focused on his beer and the dying embers of the grill. "I mean, some people are just integral to the fabric of a family," Isabella continued, warming to her theme. And others. She paused dramatically, letting the implications hang in the air like smoke from the barbecue. Well, others might come and go without really affecting the essential dynamic. What happened next unfolded with the slow-motion clarity of a car accident. Isabella, emboldened by wine and the approving murmurs from her family, decided to turn her abstract observations into something much more personal and devastating. Actually, you know what would be an interesting thought experiment? Isabella said, setting down her wine glass and looking directly at me for the first time all evening. What if Francesca just disappeared tomorrow? Like, what if she just vanished into thin air? Daniel laughed immediately, as if this was the funniest thing he had ever heard. Oh man, that is dark, Isabella, but kind of hilarious to think about. No, seriously? Isabella continued, encouraged by her brother's reaction. Think about it logically. What would actually change in our family dynamic? Marcus would probably be relieved, honestly. Patricia actually giggled, a sound that made my blood turn to ice water in my veins. Well, Marcus could certainly find someone more suitable? Someone who understands our family's values and expectations? Harold nodded thoughtfully, as if this was a serious academic discussion rather than a devastating character assassination. Someone with a more stable career trajectory, perhaps? Someone who could truly complement our son's achievements. Marcus was smiling now, not the cruel smile of someone enjoying another person's pain, but the oblivious smile of someone who thought this was all harmless family banter. He raised his beer in a mock toast. Here's to hypothetical disappearances, he said, and everyone laughed except me. Isabella delivered the final blow with the precision of a skilled surgeon. I mean, let's be completely honest here. If Francesca disappeared tomorrow morning, would any of us even notice? She's so quiet, so forgettable. We might not realize she was gone until Marcus mentioned it days later. The laughter that followed was the sound of my entire world crumbling. It was not malicious laughter, which somehow made it worse. It was the casual amusement of people discussing something they found mildly entertaining, like a weather forecast or a television show. They were not trying to hurt me. They were simply being honest about how little impact they thought my existence had on their lives. I sat there for what felt like an eternity, listening to them elaborate on their theme. Daniel suggested that Marcus might actually be happier with someone who could keep up with family conversations about important topics. Patricia wondered aloud whether someone with better domestic skills might be a better fit for family gatherings. Harold mentioned that compatibility was about more than just affection. It was about shared values and similar backgrounds. Marcus said nothing to defend me. He simply sat there, occasionally nodding or chuckling, along with his family's observations. In that moment, his silence spoke louder than any words could have. He was not just failing to defend me. He was agreeing with them through his inaction. Something crystallized inside me during that endless moment of cruel laughter. It was not rage exactly, though anger was certainly part of it. It was more like a sudden perfect clarity about my situation and what needed to happen next. For 3 years, I had been trying to prove my worth to people who had already decided I had none. I had been begging for acceptance from people who saw me as fundamentally inadequate. I stood up slowly, my chair scraping against the patio stones, with a sound that somehow cut through the laughter. Every face turned toward me with expressions of mild surprise, as if they had genuinely forgotten I was there. I raised my hand like a student in a classroom waiting for the teacher to call on me. The laughter died away gradually as they realized I was about to speak. Marcus looked confused, Patricia appeared annoyed at the interruption, and Isabella wore the expression of someone who had just realized their joke might have gone too far. Challenge accepted, I said clearly, my voice carrying across the sudden silence with perfect clarity. The words hung in the air like smoke from an extinguished candle. For several heartbeats, nobody moved or spoke. Then Marcus tried to laugh it off the way people do when they sense a situation spiraling beyond their control. "Honey, come on," he said, his voice taking on that patronizing tone he used when he thought I was being overly dramatic. "Nobody is being serious here. We are just having some family fun. Do not take everything so personally." But I had never been more serious about anything in my entire life. The clarity that had struck me during their laughter remained crystal clear and unshakable. I looked around the table at these people who had just casually discussed my worthlessness, and I felt something I had not experienced in years: complete certainty about what I needed to do. "I am not being dramatic, Marcus," I replied, my voice steady and calm. "Your family just told me that my disappearance would go unnoticed. They said I am forgettable, that you would be better off without me, that I add nothing of value to your lives. I believe them." Patricia tried to backtrack, suddenly realizing that their entertainment had taken a serious turn. "Oh, sweetheart, we were just joking around. You know how families tease each other." "No," I said firmly. "You were not teasing. You were being honest, probably for the first time since I joined this family. And I appreciate that honesty because it has helped me understand something important about my life." Isabella, perhaps recognizing the legal implications of the hole she had dug, attempted to smooth things over. "Francesca, look, maybe we had a little too much wine and things got carried away. Let's just forget this whole conversation happened." I smiled, then a real smile that probably looked terrifying in the context of the conversation we had just had. "Oh, I am not going to forget this conversation. This conversation is going to change everything." I walked calmly into the house, leaving them sitting in stunned silence on the patio. I could hear urgent whispered discussions starting behind me, but their words no longer mattered. For the first time in 3 years, I was not trying to earn their approval or decode their hidden meanings. I was simply done. Back in the house that I had tried so hard to think of as home, I began the most systematic and decisive action I had ever taken. I pulled out my suitcases and started packing with the methodical precision of someone who had suddenly discovered their true priorities. Clothes, personal documents, the few items that belonged solely to me, rather than to us as a couple. Marcus found me 20 minutes later, folding my clothes into neat stacks. He stood in the doorway, looking confused and slightly irritated, as if I was throwing an inexplicable tantrum that he needed to manage. "What are you doing, Francesca? This is ridiculous. You cannot just pack up and leave because of some stupid family jokes." I continued folding without looking up at him. "Watch me." "Come on, be reasonable. Where would you even go? What would you do? You are acting like a child who did not get her way." That made me pause in my packing and look directly at him. "Marcus, your family just spent 20 minutes discussing how my disappearance would improve everyone's life, including yours. You sat there and smiled and agreed with them. You toasted the idea of me vanishing. And now you want me to be reasonable." He shifted uncomfortably, running his hand through his hair in the gesture he made when he was trying to think of the right thing to say. They did not mean it the way it sounded. You know how Isabella gets when she has been drinking. And my parents, they just want what is best for me. And apparently, what is best for you is not me. That is not what I said. You did not have to say it, Marcus. Your silence said everything I needed to hear. I finished packing while he alternated between pleading with me to be reasonable and threatening that I was making a huge mistake I would regret. I called Emma, my best friend from college, who lived in Portland, and asked if I could stay with her for a while. Emma, who had never liked Marcus and had been diplomatically quiet about it for 3 years, immediately said yes and asked if she needed to come help me move. By 10 o'clock that night, I had loaded everything that truly belonged to me into my car. It was remarkably little, I realized. 3 years of marriage, and I could fit my entire independent existence into a Honda Civic. Marcus made one final attempt to convince me to stay standing in the driveway as I loaded the last box. "You are really going to throw away our marriage because of some stupid family barbecue." I closed the trunk and turned to face my husband for what I knew would be the last time. "I am not throwing away our marriage, Marcus. Your family did that tonight, and you helped them. I am just accepting the reality that you all made very clear to me." I left a note on the kitchen counter explaining that I was not abandoning my responsibilities. I was accepting their assessment of my value and acting accordingly. If my presence was so negligible that my absence would go unnoticed, then they should have no trouble adjusting to life without me. I wished them well and suggested that Marcus might want to reflect on why he had allowed his family to treat his wife with such contempt. Then, I drove away from the life I had spent 3 years trying to build, heading toward something unknown, but infinitely more hopeful. For the first time since my wedding day, I felt like I was moving in the right direction. Portland welcomed me like a city that had been waiting for my arrival. Emma lived in a converted warehouse in the Pearl District with exposed brick walls and enormous windows that let in cascades of natural light. After the suffocating perfection of Marcus's suburban existence, her chaotic, art-filled space felt like oxygen to someone who had been drowning. "You look different," Emma said the morning after my arrival, studying my face over coffee and croissants from the bakery downstairs. "Not just tired from driving, different in a good way." She was right. For the first time in years, I was not performing the exhausting daily task of trying to be someone else's version of an acceptable wife. I was not monitoring my words, moderating my opinions, or shrinking myself to fit into spaces where I was not truly wanted. The relief was so profound, it felt almost physical. Within a week, I had secured interviews at 3 marketing firms. My portfolio, which had been gathering dust while I focused on being the perfect daughter-in-law, suddenly seemed impressive again. The skills I had been developing at my small firm translated beautifully to larger, more dynamic companies. 2 weeks after leaving Marcus, I accepted a position as senior marketing coordinator at a sustainable design firm with a salary that was 40% higher than what I had been making. My new colleagues treated my ideas with respect and enthusiasm. They asked for my opinions in meetings and actually listened to my responses. I remembered what it felt like to be valued for my mind, rather than tolerated as an accessory to someone else's life. I threw myself into learning and growing in ways I had not done since college. I took weekend photography classes, enrolled in Spanish lessons through the community center, and started rock climbing at a gym near Emma's apartment. Each new skill felt like reclaiming a part of myself that I had forgotten existed. The volunteer work at the animal shelter became particularly meaningful. Working with abandoned and injured animals, helping them learn to trust again, felt symbolic of my own healing process. The dogs did not care about my career trajectory or my family background. They simply responded to kindness and consistency. 3 months after leaving, I started a blog called Invisible No More, where I wrote about the journey of rediscovering your worth after being made to feel worthless. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Women from around the world shared their own stories of being overlooked, undervalued, and dismissed. The blog grew to thousands of followers within months. Meanwhile, back in Marcus's world, things were apparently not going as smoothly as Isabella had predicted. Through mutual friends and the occasional social media glimpse, I learned that my absence was being felt in ways they had not anticipated. Marcus was struggling with basic household management, having never learned to handle the domestic responsibilities I had quietly managed. Patricia was having to cook for family gatherings herself, apparently discovering that hosting was more work than she had realized when someone else was doing it. More significantly, the family was starting to fracture in small ways without me there as a buffer. Isabella's marriage was having problems, and she had apparently tried to reach out to me through several channels for advice, forgetting that I was the one person in their circle who had always listened without judgment. Daniel was struggling with the pressures of medical school and missing the tutoring help I had provided in chemistry and biology. Marcus hired a private investigator to find me, which Emma and I found both flattering and slightly disturbing. Through legal channels, I sent word that I was safe and well, but had no interest in communication. I had changed my phone number, email address, and blocked the entire family on social media. I was not hiding exactly. I was simply living a life that did not include them. 6 months in, I met Alex at a photography exhibition downtown. He was a freelance photographer who specialized in architectural photography, and he had an easy confidence that was the opposite of Marcus's defensive superiority. Alex was genuinely curious about my thoughts and experiences. He asked questions and listened to the answers. He introduced me to his friends as someone he respected, not as an extension of himself. By the time a year had passed, I was living in my own apartment with a view of the Columbia River. I had been promoted to team leader at work. My blog had become a small but sustainable source of additional income, and I had a circle of friends who valued me for exactly who I was. The woman who had left that barbecue in tears was barely recognizable in the confident person I had become. The final confrontation came inevitably when Marcus managed to track down my location through Emma. He appeared at my favorite coffee shop on a Tuesday morning, looking haggard and desperate, in a way that might have broken my heart a year earlier. "Francesca, we need to talk," he said, sliding into the seat across from me without invitation. I looked up from my laptop, where I had been working on a proposal for a major client, and felt nothing but mild curiosity about what he might want to say. The power he had once held over my emotions had simply evaporated. "Hello, Marcus. You look tired." "I have been tired for a year, Francesca. We all have. You just disappeared, and everything fell apart." I closed my laptop and gave him my full attention, not out of lingering affection, but out of basic politeness. "Everything fell apart. Or did you just realize how much work I had been doing to hold things together?" He looked genuinely confused by the question, which told me everything I needed to know about how little he had understood about our marriage. "I do not understand why you are being so cold. We used to be happy together." "Were we? Or was I just so desperate for your approval that I convinced myself contentment was the same thing as happiness?" I showed him pictures on my phone from my new life. Photos of me rock climbing, laughing with friends at dinner parties, presenting at work conferences, hiking in the Columbia River Gorge with Alex. In every image, I looked genuinely happy, in a way I could not remember ever looking during our marriage. "Challenge completed, Marcus. You wanted to know if anyone would notice if I disappeared. Well, now you know. But here is the thing I learned. The people who matter did notice, and they are not the people I left behind." I explained that I was not angry anymore, which seemed to surprise him. Anger had been replaced by a deep sense of gratitude for the clarity his family had forced upon me. Their cruelty had been a gift, though they would never understand it that way. "I forgive you and your family," I said as I prepared to leave. "But forgiveness does not mean going back to a situation that diminished me. I have built a life where I am valued, respected, and genuinely loved. Why would I give that up to return to being invisible?" Marcus made one final plea about the years we had invested in our relationship, but I gently pointed out that those had been years of me investing in becoming someone other than myself. The return on that investment had been the devastating clarity that I deserved better. As I walked away from that coffee shop and back into my real life, I reflected on the strange journey that had brought me to this point. Sometimes, the cruelest gifts are also the most valuable ones. Isabella's joke had forced me to see truths I had been avoiding for years. Marcus's silence had shown me exactly how much support I could expect from him when it mattered. The woman who had raised her hand and said, "Challenge accepted," at that barbecue, had known something that took me months to fully understand. Proving your worth to people who are determined not to see it is a waste of precious time and energy. The real challenge was not making them notice me. It was learning to live so fully and authentically that their opinions became irrelevant. I never returned to Marcus, though I heard through friends that he eventually remarried someone his family considered more suitable. I wished him well and meant it. He deserved to be with someone who wanted to live his life, just as I deserved to live mine. Looking back now, I can see that disappearing was not about revenge or punishment. It was about choosing visibility on my own terms. When someone tells you that you are invisible, you have two choices. You can exhaust yourself trying to prove them wrong, or you can vanish completely and then return as someone who cannot be ignored, overlooked, or dismissed. I chose the latter, and it changed everything. What would you have done in my situation? Have you ever felt invisible in your own life? Leave me a comment below, sharing your thoughts or your own experiences with finding your worth. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more stories about transformation and self-discovery. And please share this video with anyone who might need to hear that they deserve to be seen and valued for exactly who they are. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember that sometimes the best way to become unforgettable is to first have the courage to disappear. Until next time, keep believing in your own worth.